is in the United States. The hostility to Putin, it's really mind-boggling. My good friend Steve Cohen, who's now dead, who is a very prominent Sovietologist in his day and expert on Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed. Steve was on the left politically, and he argued that it was much easier during the Cold War to make arguments that were sympathetic to the Soviet Union than it is to make arguments that are sympathetic to Russia in the contemporary political environment. It's a really remarkable statement. And people like Steve, and this is true of me, making the sorts of arguments you've listened to today, and hopefully many of you have seen with my video on YouTube, right? We're accused of being Russian dupes, tools of Moscow, unpatriotic, and so forth and so on. It's really quite remarkable. So you have acute Russophobia, and in a world where you have acute Russophobia, taking a stick and poking the Russians in the eye is perfectly legitimate. In fact, it's a good thing. And by the way, this cuts across political lines. So the Russophobia is as pronounced in the Republican Party as it is in the Democratic Party. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the Russians didn't play hardball for a long time. They swallowed the first NATO expansion. They swallowed the second NATO expansion. And even after the Ukraine crisis in February 2014, yes, they took Crimea. Yes, they helped support the Russian speakers and the Russians in the Donbass, but they didn't get really rough with the United States. So the Americans have this powerful sense of Russophobia, and they have a powerful sense that the Russians are weak and that we can just push them around. We can poke them in the eye and they're not going to do anything. And this is why I said, David, in my formal comments, that the Russians have had enough. Lavrov has said explicitly, we reached our boiling point. And the Russians have made it clear they are not screwing around. They are deadly serious. And I think we've gotten the message. And I think we will be much more careful when we deal with them in the future than we have been in the past. I'm not exactly sure. It's a subject I've thought about getting a bunch of people together to talk about and just talk it through. I mean, I'd be curious what, you folks have to say about this. I mean, it has to do, I think, in part with the fact that the Soviet Union was our mortal enemy during the Cold War. Russia is the key remnant state left over from the Soviet Union. So I think there is a lot of